Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. For those that are new to my YouTube channel, subscribe immediately to see more content, and also leave a comment down below to suggest more amazing kinds of videos. Bring in the finale of What If Spider-Man MCU entered Damnchi. Link down in description of the fan fiction This What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 29 Justice. After asking around the city for directions more than once, the Hestia Familia finally found themselves standing before the sprawling forge complex of the Goibniu Familia. The establishment was impossible to miss once located, less a simple workshop and more a full-scale smithy, with tall chimneys belching smoke and the constant ringing of hammer on steel echoing into the street. Earlier, they had stopped by the guild to exchange the girls' first dive loot. It had only amounted to a meager 1,200 valis, not much by Orario's standards, but for a first dungeon run, it was honest earnings. Afterward, they visited the Cubera Familia's bank to open an official Familia account. Peter had transferred funds from the recent Mithril sale into it and withdrawn some valis for immediate expenses. Leo had been especially intrigued by the bank. It was the first one she had ever entered, and she observed everything carefully, the way transactions were recorded, the security measures, the guarded vault doors. Her merchant instincts were clearly alive and well. Now, as they stepped into the Goibniu Familia's forge, Peter felt it immediately. Eyes on him, several smiths slowed their hammering, their gazes lingering on his integrated suit, the unfamiliar material reflecting the forge's firelight in ways they clearly didn't understand. And, oddly enough, more than one glance flicked toward the dagger clipped to his belt, Tiona's dagger. Peter approached one of the human blacksmiths near the entrance. "I'm looking for Kellen Forgeheart." The man paused, then jerked his thumb toward the rear of the facility. "Back corridor, last forge on the right." As Peter thanked him, he noticed a nearby dwarf blacksmith grimace faintly at the name before returning to his work. Interesting. They followed the directions down a narrower corridor, the noise of the main hall fading slightly. At the end, they found a smaller, more secluded forge. Kellen Forgeheart was hammering away at an unfinished blade. She had the compact build of a dwarf but was tall by dwarven standards. Her features were sharp, and her ears, though shorter than a pure elf's, clearly carried elven blood. Sparks flew around her as she worked, focused and steady. Her forge space was organized but crowded. Weapons and armor lay arranged along racks and worktables. Knives and swords bore small crystals embedded at the base of their hilts. "Kellen Forgeheart?" Peter asked. She stopped mid-swing. Her eyes swept over him first, measured, assessing, then shifted briefly to Belle and the girls. They paused for a fraction longer on Primo's ears before returning to Peter. Her gaze lingered on his integrated suit. Then it dropped to Tiona's dagger clipped at his belt. Her expression changed instantly. "Yes, that's me," she said, tone sharpening slightly. "How can I help you, sir?" "Rhea Marlowe from Hecate Familia recommended you." "Rhea?" Kellen nodded. "Yes, she has a contract with me. She enchants my weapons." She studied him again. "But she's only level 1, just like me. Why would a high-class adventurer like you need my services?" Peter frowned. "What makes you think I'm a high-class adventurer?" Kellen crossed her arms. "Your armor is unique. I've never seen anything like it before." She gestured subtly toward his belt. "And that dagger bears our god's mark. Goibniu only allows high-class blacksmiths to use his mark, and only on crafts he has personally inspected. Anything carrying that mark is worth millions of valis." Leo's eyes narrowed slightly as she examined the dagger more carefully. Peter blinked. Tiona had casually loaned him a dagger worth millions of valis. "This isn't mine," Peter said evenly. "A friend loaned it to me." Kalen's brow lifted. "Must be quite a friend," she said dryly, "to lend you something that valuable." "So," Kellen said at last, setting her hammer aside, "what do you need?" Peter gestured toward Primo's staff. "We'd like to attach a spearhead to the end." Kellen extended her hand. Primo hesitated for just a second before stepping forward and handing the staff over. The half-dwarf ran her fingers along the wood, examining the grain, the balance, the embedded gem. "This is definitely Ray's work," she murmured. "Her enchantment pattern is clean." She looked up at Primo. "Are you certain you want to modify your staff like that?" Primo nodded without wavering. Kellen gave a faint, knowing look. Most elves wouldn't dream of attaching a spearhead to their staff. Her tone turned dry. "In fact, most elves wouldn't be caught dead using anything forged by me." There was no bitterness in her voice, just a blunt statement of fact. Primo straightened slightly. The captain doesn't want me to be helpless in melee combat, she said carefully. He doesn't want me to be a one-trick pony. She still didn't fully understand the strange phrase Peter had used when explaining it, but she understood the meaning. Leo, of course, had enthusiastically supported the idea, launching into a brief speech about how versatile and honorable spears were, especially since the Great Finn used one. Kellen snorted faintly. Good for you, but most elves would hate you for it. Primo lifted her chin. I don't really care about their opinions, she said firmly. I'll follow my captain's advice. Kellen hummed thoughtfully as she continued inspecting the staff. Are you a new adventurer? Primo nodded. Yes, I just started today. Kellen tapped the end of the staff lightly. Most metals interfere with magic flow. You'd lose efficiency. She examined the grain of the wood again before adding, I can shape one from killer ant mandibles. Light, durable, and it won't disrupt the spell circuits. It'll be more than enough for the upper floors. Peter gave a small nod. That made sense. It'll cost 20,000 Valis. Leo immediately stepped forward. 20,000, for shaped mandibles, she protested. She's a brand new adventurer, you're trying to bankrupt her on her first day. Kellen crossed her arms, unimpressed. After several minutes of back and forth, Leo arguing about material costs, future business, and fair treatment for promising newcomers, Kellen finally relented with a sigh. Fine, 15,000, not a Valis less. Leo grinned in triumph. Kellen then tilted her head slightly. Since she's new, can I interest you in something else? She produced a curved blade from a rack beside her workbench. It was sleek and dark, its gently arcing edge carrying a faint, almost oily sheen beneath the forge light. A crystal was set at the bottom of the hilt, polished smooth and glinting faintly as it caught the glow of the flames. The hilt functions as a wand, Kellen explained. Channel your magic through it, and the blade is forged from War Shadow Claw. Primo's eyes widened slightly. It'll only cost 30,000. Leo's expression sharpened instantly. 30, for a level 1 knife. And she already has a guild-issued War Shadow blade. Kellen raised an eyebrow. A basic one. Leo pressed on. We'll trade that in. You can resell it easily. 20,000. Another round of negotiation followed, shorter this time, more deliberate. Finally, Kellen clicked her tongue. 20,000. With the trade. Leo beamed again. Peter stepped forward and paid without comment. Kellen kept Primo's staff, resting it carefully against her forge bench. I'll have this ready the morning after tomorrow, she said. Come early. Primo bowed politely. As they stepped out of Kellen's forge, Peter's eyes caught the workshop across the narrow corridor. Unlike the others, it was filled with woodworks, a handful of crossbows in various stages of completion. But these weren't ordinary crossbows. Something about them drew him closer, almost instinctively. The crossbows had unusual handle mechanisms, likely designed to make reloading faster. Peter leaned in for a closer inspection. Are you interested in my bowguns? A soft, tentative voice asked. Peter turned to see a striking girl standing nearby. She had vivid green eyes and long red hair tied into a tail behind her head. Her short teal and brown top left her midriff exposed, and her matching shorts suggested mobility over formality. Her angular features hinted that she wasn't fully human, perhaps part dwarf. Bowguns, Peter repeated. How are they different from regular crossbows? Belle and the girls had followed him inside, curiously looking over the few bowguns on the workbench. They're a bit faster, the girl said, her tone calm but hopeful. Crossbows take time to reload, and you can only fire one bolt at a time. These let you preload multiple bolts and fire more quickly. She picked up one of the bowguns and aimed at a makeshift target board on the wall. With a smooth motion, she used the handle beneath the weapon to chamber a bolt and fired. 3 shots hit the center in quick succession. She lowered the bowgun and gave a small, almost shy smile. See, it's a little different from normal crossbows. Peter leaned closer. How many bolts can you load at once? She hesitated, glancing down. 3 or 4 is the maximum, for now. Peter's curiosity got the better of him. Show me how you reload the bolts. She strung up the crossbow and began loading bolts one at a time into the body. The process was painstakingly slow. She flushed slightly as she worked. I'm still figuring out how to reload faster, she admitted softly. Peter's inner inventor sparked. What if you used magazines to reload? She frowned, puzzled. Magazines. A magazine is a container where you can preload multiple bolts, Peter explained. Then you insert the entire magazine into the bogan instead of loading each bolt individually. Her eyes widened. Do you have a paper? Peter asked. She nodded quickly and handed him a sheet and a quill. Peter crouched slightly and began sketching, lines rough but clear, showing where a magazine could fit into the bogan and how it would feed bolts automatically. She leaned over, her green eyes following every stroke, her lips parted in quiet fascination. When he finished, she let out a soft gasp. Wow, you're a genius, she whispered, a hopeful smile spreading across her face. Peter shrugged modestly. Just a rough idea, you'd have to test it in practice. She nodded eagerly, already picturing how it could work. I can't wait to try it, she murmured, her eyes bright with determination. Then, almost hesitantly, she added, you're the first person who hasn't ridiculed me, besides my God. Everyone else, even the rest of my familia, thinks I'm wasting my time on impractical weapons. Peter gave a small nod. Most great ideas get ridiculed at first. She gave a small, hesitant smile. Thank you, that idea will really improve my bogan. Then, glancing at the others, she added quietly, could I join your party for dungeon diving? Peter raised an eyebrow. Your own familia, what about them? She shrugged, eyes dropping to her boots. They only use me as a supporter. And they get annoyed whenever I stop to reload my bogan. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides. They've already labeled me the crazy bogan girl. A faint, frustrated breath escaped her. I don't think I can fix my reputation anytime soon, but, you, she looked up at him, earnest and almost desperate. You actually see my potential. She straightened and bowed her head quickly. So please, let me join your party. Peter considered her offer carefully. Having an extra hand in the dungeon, especially someone older and more capable, would definitely be helpful for the girls. And what's your name? He asked. Marco Powell, she replied. And your age? Peter asked. 16, she said. Peter nodded. How far down have you gone? By myself, not very far, Marco admitted. But as a supporter, I've been down to the 10th floor a few times. Peter studied her for a moment, then said, I'd like you to join our familia's second-string adventurers. He gestured toward the 3 girls, but keep in mind, they have almost no experience. They're just starting out. Marco's shoulders straightened slightly. That's fine. It'll be better than being stuck as a supporter for more than a year, like I have been. Peter asked, do you use any other weapons? She shook her head. Better to have a backup instead of relying only on your bogan, Peter said. I can carry a sword, she said. But I'm not very good with one. It's just a backup, Peter replied. If your bogan fails, or something gets too close, you'll need it. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Peter tilted his head. Do we need to ask permission from your god before you team up with us? Marco thought for a moment. It's best if we do. That way, no one in my familia can object. Peter turned to Belle. Belle, why don't you go with her to Lord Goibniu to seek his permission? Belle blinked, flustered. Me, you're the vice captain of the familia, Peter said firmly. It's best if you go. He didn't want to go himself. Gods were living lie detectors, and between his integrated suit and Tiona's dagger, he was already attracting too much attention from the blacksmiths. The last thing he wanted was to face the scrutiny of a smithing god. Marco led Belle deeper into her god's forge. Goibniu appeared as a very short old man with long, straight white hair and a silver beard that reached his chest. Despite his height, his frame was solid and powerfully built. He stood before an anvil, hammering rhythmically at a half-finished breastplate, sweat rolling down his temples as sparks leapt with every strike. Marco waited patiently, hands clasped behind her back, not daring to interrupt. Beside her, Belle fidgeted slightly, the heat of the forge and the presence of a god making him nervous. At last, Goibniu paused, lowering his hammer to wipe the sweat from his brow. Marco stepped forward. Lord Goibniu, I have a request. The god glanced at her without turning fully. I would like permission to team up with an outside familia. Belle quickly gave a small bow. It would be an honor to have her join our party, Lord Goibniu. Goibniu studied them for a brief moment, then shrugged. Fine by me. He lifted his hammer again and resumed striking the armor as if the matter were already forgotten. After they left, however, Goibniu slowed his hammering slightly, a faint frown touching his brow. He hadn't even asked the name of the familia Marco was teaming up with. He snorted softly to himself. If they were willing to take along a low-level 1 adventurer obsessed with her crossbows, they were likely an unimportant familia anyway. The hammer rang out again, echoing through the forge. Leo walked toward the market beside the others, her thoughts unusually heavy. They had truly stumbled into a strange familia. Most familias had rejected them outright. Some had barely listened before dismissing them. But Goddess Hestia had welcomed them with open arms, even after they had foolishly started by praising the executives of the Loki familia. And Hestia clearly despised Loki. The rundown church they were living in had made Leo uneasy at first. It had creaked in the wind, the roof looked like it might cave in during heavy rain. She had been certain they had joined one of the poorest familias in Orario. Then there was the captain. Peter had interrogated them calmly and methodically. He had uncovered her past, the darkest part of it. She had expected anger, disgust, expulsion. She had expected to be cast out the moment they learned she had killed a man. Instead, they had offered support. That alone had unsettled her more than rejection would have. And then there was the spirit in his suit, Jane. Leo had traveled widely. She had seen rare magic, ancient ruins, and strange races. But nothing compared to the being bound within Peter's armor. Jane could conjure images made of pure light, perfect, lifelike forms of monsters that moved and reacted as if real. Leo didn't understand how such a thing was possible. It wasn't spirit magic as she knew it. It was something else entirely. And the music Jane could produce, it was unlike any instruments Leo had ever heard. And today, Peter had casually spent over 150,000 valis on their equipment. Casually. Even wealthy and powerful familias rarely invested that much into rookies. And if they did, it came as a crushing loan, a debt that would take months, sometimes years, to repay. But Peter had paid without hesitation. No contract, no debt, no conditions. Kalen's earlier words echoed in Leo's mind. The dagger at his belt bore Lord Goibniu's mark and was worth millions of valis. She glanced at him. Just who lent you that dagger? Peter looked back at her casually. It's Tiona's dagger. She gave it to me after my swords broke against a minotaur. Gina stared at the weapon with open admiration. Belle blinked. Why, you fought a minotaur? Yes, Peter replied simply. I killed a few. Belle's eyes widened, a mix of shock and awe written plainly across his face. Leo frowned. Minotaurs were powerful level 2 monsters. Peter was only level 1, at least officially. And yet he spoke of killing several as if it were routine. Still, he had apparently defeated Tiona, a level 5, in combat. When measured against that, slaying a handful of minotaurs didn't seem so impossible. By the time her thoughts settled, they had reached the market district. Peter mentioned he would head to the carpentry stalls to buy supplies to board up the church's broken windows. Leo, meanwhile, had her eye on a crystal-powered stove and proper kitchen utensils. If they were going to live together, they would at least eat properly. Let's split up, Leo said. Peter walked over to her and handed her a pouch heavy with valis. She weighed it in her palm. Yesterday, Goddess Hestia had trusted her with money. Today, Peter was doing the same. Without question, Peter then lifted one hand and held it against the opposite palm. There was a faint splat sound. For a split second, Leo thought she saw something shoot across the short distance at incredible speed and land in his gloved hand. Take this, he said, holding his palm out to her. A spider sat there. Leo nearly recoiled, a flicker of disgust rising in her chest, but she steadied herself. She wasn't some sheltered girl afraid of insects. She took it cautiously. It didn't move. It wasn't alive. Peter said, it's a spider tracker. It'll help me locate you once I finish shopping. Keep it on you at all times. He gently took it back for a moment and pointed to a tiny red indentation beneath its body. If you're ever in danger, press this. It'll send a distress signal. If I'm within a few miles, I'll receive it and come to you. Leo stared at the item, her mind racing. This wasn't standard magic craftsmanship. It wasn't even recognizable as a conventional magical item. Saying nothing more, Peter turned and headed toward the carpentry shops, Belle hurrying after him. Gina and Primo leaned closer, examining the spider-like device in Leo's hand. What kind of magical item is this? Primo whispered. Leo didn't answer. Just who was their captain? Peter hung perpendicular to the church wall, as he hammered planks over the broken windows. His spider powers made building maintenance almost unfairly easy. What would normally require scaffolding, ropes, and several workers, he handled alone, crawling effortlessly across the vertical surface, webbing each plank into place before securing it with nails. Hours of labor were finished in minutes. Below him, Bell was busy sawing planks to size, tongue sticking out slightly in concentration as he worked. Inside the church, the girls and Hestia were setting up the basement kitchen. Leo had been especially insistent that they eat a proper home-cooked meal today. With the plank secured, Peter casually pushed off the wall and dropped nearly 40 feet, landing lightly beside Bell. Bell nearly jumped out of his skin. "See, Captain, you can't just drop like that." Peter smirked slightly. "You'll get used to it." He glanced toward the empty streets beyond the church. Why is the abandoned district abandoned? Orario was densely populated. Space was scarce. It didn't make sense that an entire district sat empty. Bell stopped sawing and leaned back on his heels. "Well, a few years ago, there was this group called Evolus," he began. Peter paused slightly. "Evolus," he mused inwardly. "That has to be the most painfully unoriginal name for an evil organization I've ever heard." Bell continued. "They were a coalition of several familias led by evil gods. They caused a lot of chaos in the city." He swallowed before continuing. "They set off bombs across this whole district. Thousands of people died, even some gods." Peter's expression darkened slightly. Bell looked around at the crumbling buildings and empty streets. "After that, everyone said the place was cursed. Inauspicious. No one wanted to live here anymore." Peter stood silently for a moment, considering the implications. Thousands had died in what could only be described as a terrorist attack. This world wasn't just about dungeon diving and leveling up. It had rot in it. There was only a little boarding left to finish, and the sun was still up. After wrapping things up here, he would head to the guild library and start researching. If he was going to fight injustice in this world, he needed to understand it first. The guild library was empty when Peter entered. Only the fox-eared librarian was present, seated behind the front desk beneath the tall, arched windows. Dust motes drifted lazily through the golden shafts of late afternoon light. She looked up as he approached, recognition brightening her eyes. "Peter, isn't it?" He smiled. "Yeah, sorry. I didn't catch your name before." She inclined her head politely. "Merrill Lydell. I tend the guild's records." "Nice to meet you properly, Merrill." He rested his hands lightly on the counter. "I was hoping to find writings about how justice is carried out in Orario. Laws, punishments, that sort of thing." She gave a short, bitter scoff, her tail flicking sharply behind her. Justice. The word did not sound respected on her tongue. Justice left Orario 5 years ago. Peter frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Her golden eyes dimmed slightly. "I speak of Lady Estrella, the goddess of justice." She paused, fingers tightening faintly around the edge of the desk. Her entire familia was slaughtered trying to uphold what was right. When they fell, she left Orario. Peter studied her expression, the way her voice flattened, the way her tail had gone still. This wasn't just history to her. "So, she used to uphold justice in Orario?" he asked carefully. "In a manner of speaking," Merrill replied. "The Estrella familia stood beside the Ganesha familia in keeping order. They judged disputes, hunted criminals. They did not bend, no matter how powerful the offender." A faint note of admiration entered her voice. Lady Estrella feared nothing, not even the gods of Evolus who hid in shadow. When Erebus, the one responsible for the deaths of thousands, revealed himself, she struck him down and sent him back to heaven with her own hands. Peter absorbed that quietly. In her absence, Merrill continued, "Lord Ganesha strives to keep peace. He truly does. But," she hesitated. "But, he does not pass harsh judgment easily. He believes in patience, in reform." Her mouth thinned. "Sometimes the wicked do not deserve patience." Silence stretched between them. Peter's voice lowered. "You said her familia was slaughtered." Her golden eyes grew distant. "Evolus lured Estrella familia deep into the dungeon," Merrill continued quietly. "An ambush, carefully prepared, ruthless." Her voice wavered, but did not break. "They were slaughtered." Silence pressed in around them. Merrill added after a moment. "Lady Estrella left Orario. She could not remain in a city that had failed her children. But there was one who did not fall," she continued. "The Gale Wind." The name seemed to cut through the air itself. Merrill straightened slightly, pride overtaking grief. When Lady Estrella left Orario, the Gale Wind remained. And she did not mourn quietly. There was something fierce in her eyes now. She went to war. Peter listened without interrupting. The guild hesitated. The great familias debated. They spoke of stability, of consequences, of the balance of power. Her tail flicked sharply. She did not. Meryl's voice hardened. She hunted Evelys through the streets, through the ruins, through the dungeon itself. One by one she cut them down. Her eyes shone, not with tears, but with conviction. She did what the guild could not. What the powerful familias would not. A breath. She wiped them out. Peter's chest tightened. Every last one, Meryl said. Like they deserved. There was no condemnation in her tone. Only reverence. She was a true hero. The empty library seemed to echo with the legend. Peter finally asked, and where is the gale wind now? Meryl's expression softened. No one truly knows. Some say she left Orario. Others claim she fell at the end of her crusade. She shook her head faintly. I do not believe she is dead. Her gaze sharpened again, as though she could see something beyond the walls. I think she is waiting. A quiet intensity filled her voice. And if evil ever dares to rise in Orario again, the gale wind will return. Peter fell quiet. The gale wind, a lone warrior cutting through the shadows where law had failed. He couldn't help the comparison that rose in his mind. A vigilante, ruthless, relentless, like the Punisher had been back in New York. But Meryl did not speak of her with fear. She spoke with reverence. That told him everything. He studied the fox woman for a moment, then asked gently, you lost someone, didn't you? Meryl's expression did not change, but something in her eyes dimmed. Yes, she said simply. During an Evelys attack. She offered nothing more. Peter didn't press. Silence lingered between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Grief recognized grief. After a moment, he spoke again. So how is justice carried out now? Meryl straightened slightly. In Orario, matters are handled by the guild or by the Ganesha Familia. Peter listened carefully. For common folk, merchants, craftsmen, townspeople, trouble is handled by the Ganesha Familia. They keep the peace in the streets. Thieves, brawlers, those who break the order of the city, they are seized and judged by them. Grave matters may be brought before Lord Ganesha himself. She folded her hands neatly atop the desk. As for adventurers and familias, that falls to the guild. The guild may impose fines, place restrictions upon a familia, blacklist them, or cast them out of Orario entirely. She paused, then continued, when quarrels rise between familias, they are most often settled through war games. The gods favor such contests over chaos in the streets. Peter's brow faintly furrowed. For smaller disputes among adventurers, Royman Mardial, the guild's administrative head, passes judgment. Greater matters are laid before Lord Oranos. Her voice was calm, measured. But many disputes go unnoticed. Adventurers have the perfect place to settle their conflicts. What happens in the dungeon often stays there. And it is not uncommon for adventurers to never return. Peter blinked at the implication. She lowered her voice slightly. And when matters are so heavy they shake the city itself, they are carried to Donatus. Her gaze lifted toward the high ceiling. There, the gods gather in council. Together, they decide. Silence settled between them once more. Peter then asked, are there any books on Orario's recent history? Meryl shook her head. The guild does not keep detailed chronicles of recent events. Those records are maintained by the Sachat Familia. If you seek thorough accounts, you should try their library. Peter nodded, filing that away. Peter nodded slowly. All right, then do you have anything about the world outside Orario? Other kingdoms. The lands beyond the city. Meryl's expression softened slightly. That we do. She gestured toward a distant aisle. Third row to the left. The upper shelves hold maps of the continent and neighboring realms. Below them are volumes describing the major kingdoms and their borders. Thanks. He made his way over and began pulling down thick, leather-bound books heavy with maps and aged ink. Once seated at a long wooden table, he slipped his mask into place. Jane, he murmured quietly, start scanning. As he flipped through page after page, coastlines, mountain ranges, distant nations, Jane silently recorded it all. But while his hands turned parchment, his mind wandered to what he had discovered over the past 2 days. Yesterday, he had learned about child abuse in this world, an entire familia operating as bandits. Today, he'd learned about a terrorist coalition of evil familias that had bombed an entire district, killing thousands, even gods. Justice in Orario came from the gods. When they faltered, it fell to vigilantes like the gale wind. Peter exhaled slowly. Back in New York, his role had been simple. Stop the criminals. Web them up. Leave them for the police. The system, flawed as it was, would take it from there. But here, there was no proper system to deal with criminals. Justice depended on the gods and their whims. How would Spider-Man's justice fit into a world like this? He had never been judge, jury, and executioner. With great power comes great responsibility. The words echoed quietly in his mind. He wasn't just a familiar captain trying to survive in Orario. He was Spider-Man, and in this world, that responsibility might mean far more than he had ever imagined. Author's note. Heartfelt thanks to Zanstel for the meticulous beta reading and insightful feedback. Your suggestions really helped shape this chapter. I always value honest thoughts, what resonates, what falls flat, and what could be improved. Your input not only sharpens the story but also keeps me motivated to keep writing. And this is the end of this amazing crossover, What If? Do not forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.